Good afternoon. My name's Jez Clark. I'm one of the co-founders of Eden Smith Group, and for the last 4 years we've been the exclusive staffing partner to Big Data London. Our objective here at the conference is to inform the whole data community and hopefully provide some thought leadership and some analytics around what's going on in the market, and with a view that it will help you either as a job seeker moving forward, how to position yourself, and also if you're a customer or a business that's looking to build a data team, the best way about going about that. So this year we've got 3 lounges. We've got one around education and skills and our internship programs. We've got this mid layer, which is more about strategic thinking and benchmarking for data skills. And we've got a third lounge, which is more focused on workforce planning for businesses that hopefully will help. So I'm here today just to talk a little bit about strategic thinking and benchmarking for job seekers, and also team builders. The first thing that I wanted to talk about was some more standard stuff, actually, a bit like, a lot of people ask us what are the average salaries, for examples, across all of the disciplines in the market at the moment. So I'm going to share some slides with you, and hopefully you find the presentation useful. So salary surveys for 2020, this was for the executive layer of the market, i.e. the chief data officers and heads of all of what we would call the core functions of data analytics, so data management, architecture, engineering, analytics and data science. The averages you'll see there on the screen. So for the average CDO salary in the UK at the market is about £125,000 per year plus bonus and benefits. Head of data management, 90,000, head of data architecture, 100,000, engineering, 100,000, head of analytics, about 112.5, and head of data science, 110,000. Now, what we have to think about here does depend on the size of the organization, whether it's a smaller startup business or whether or not it's a huge corporate company. In the instance of the huge corporates, then the chief data officer, for example, could go into the 250 to 300,000 pound mark. And for a lot of the other functions, there could be a 20-25% increase there, depending on the size of the business, and the other way if it's a much smaller organization. For other main or means roles, such as data architects and engineers, analysts and scientists, and people that do data management. And when we say data management, we mean policy, privacy, protection, data governance, etc. Average data architect in the UK is about £90,000, data engineering 70,000, analysts 45,000. There's quite a big range on there. Some entry-level analysts are coming in around 35k, and that can also increase up to 55 to 60, again depending on the size of the business and the experience required. Average data scientist 65k, someone with 2 to 3 years solid experience, productionizing models, etc. And for data management, across most of those disciplines, approximately 55,000. What I'd like to talk to you about now is the demand for data experts. So this is where we're looking at, is the demand for a specific function and skill set on the increase over one or the other? What we've actually looked at is the ranking against other positions. So this could be dependent on other roles in data and or other roles in technology. As you can see from the slide, all of the roles within data are on the up, which means is the last 6 months of information where data experts are higher in demand over the last 6 months based on or against other ranked positions within the world of data. This doesn't mean that there are more vacancies now in the market than what there were pre-COVID, for example, where actually it's probably a 50% reduction in actual requirements. But against other roles, they are actually on the up for all of the functions as mentioned in this presentation. Leadership has been a very interesting topic of conversation for this year. In fact, what's been most interesting is the increase in leadership roles that's been released from customers across the market in the last 6 to 12 months, particularly around data, because data has been underpinning a lot of decision making, particularly through the pandemic, but for a very, very long time. But also the importance of being a data enabled or data driven business has definitely gone higher on the priority list for most boards of directors. But what's also happened is that companies are now looking at the skills requirement or the skills that a leader should have, certainly if you're a data driven business. And we believe that actually those skills are changing from what they were to becoming something new for 2021 and beyond, meaning that new leaders will have to show very, very high levels of adaptability and flexibility. If you think about the new ways that companies will be working with regards to remote working, companies that are introducing agile into their business, this definitely puts that means that there's a much bigger requirement from leadership to be more adaptable and flexible to the environment and to the people that they're managing. There's been a huge influx in new technology over the last 2 or 3 years, especially in the data landscape. So, and because of the refresh, what we see as a recruitment organisation is that there is a requirement for different types of technology and skills approximately every 3 to 6 months in one way, shape or form, due to lots of new applications and software that support data transformation being released, and lots of investment in new startups around data science and AI, etc. So therefore, leaders of the future will definitely have to have a higher level of tech savviness as well as business acumen to be effective for future organisations. Human creativity and innovation is becoming high up on the agenda for all boards as well. The ability to introduce new products, innovate existing products, and be creative around building solutions for customers if you're a consultancy, or for changing your own products and the way that you work, is something where there's a lot of focus at the moment. And we think that there's a big requirement for innovation across all of the data-driven businesses that we speak to, and those that are looking to start up over the next 1 to 2 years. Data literacy. One of the biggest challenges that chief data officers have in an organisation is whether the employees of a business understand data and why it's important, and the right terminology and the communication, how it's used and how it flows through an organisation. And that's from the very, very top level right down to the bottom, if you like. So that's a huge cultural change. So the leadership of the future must be highly data literate and also be able to communicate that across the organisation and introduce large scale cultural change and transformation to help the organisation and its people become data literate. So the more data literate you are now, it will certainly serve you well for the future. Critical thinking, the ability to actually make very, very critical decisions in very, very short time frames, certainly will serve people well in the future. Typically because the market is refreshing and companies are having to adapt and again be more flexible in how they approach their customers, how they sell their products, and how they manage their operational models, and how quickly they're able to make decisions which are informed and also supported by the relevant data is very, very important. And lastly, agile working. As our own business, we're trying very, very hard to make sure that that's the way that we work in the organisation internally, but also how we build the solutions for our customer base. So those that are working in an agile way or have done in the past will certainly find it much easier as they move, if they move into a new organisation or work for an organisation, to make it agile, if you like, so that everybody can get involved in creating the projects, building the projects, and delivering the projects internally and externally. It's a huge cultural change for many organisations, but not one that should be missed. So leadership of the future will definitely, in our opinion, require these skills. I'm now going to hand you over to Nick Deveney, and Nick Deveney is going to talk a little bit more about the market conditions, a small amount of workforce planning. We have a Lounge 3 will be very much focused on executives and top 10 tips around workforce planning and how to approach a talent ad strategy for the future. So hope you enjoyed this. Short and sweet, very factual, I'd like to think. And yeah, we look forward to working with you in the future, and enjoy the rest of the web conference.
Thanks, Jez. At Eden Smith, we're always asked by both job seekers and clients about what skills are available in the market, what things are in demand, and how can people upskill themselves, either looking to get a job into the data industry or looking to progress their career. So, as Jez mentioned, I just want to take you through a few of the skills in the market, what's kind of in demand, what are we seeing through this post-COVID era, what kind of market conditions can you expect when coming to build your team or looking for a job in data. And then finally, just touch upon some of the future trends that we see come through, and actually about how you as business or in your business can help and prepare yourself for the future market. So again, I'm just going to share my screen here with a couple of slides to demonstrate. So one of the first things we always get asked about is obviously the adoption of cloud. So which cloud platforms are out there, which ones are being used, which one should I learn, which one should I understand, or which one should my business be using? I think in today's enterprise data models, companies are using all of, one of, or a mix of the big platforms. But certainly when you're a candidate or a job seeker looking to upskill or looking to kind of grow in your industry, which ones do you kind of focus on? So first of all, looking at the kind of percentage of UK jobs that cite cloud in the last 6 months, we can actually see that in the permanent world, Azure is quite still one of the most popular, and GCP and AWS are picking up some of the market share there, and the similar is seen in contracts. So out of the kind of skills that are out there in the market at the moment, the jobs are out there, Azure seems to be the favorite. But when we apply that to the kind of disciplines around data science, data engineering, management and architecture and analytics, and in the data world, actually we start to see a very different story. So again, here we can see that, in engineering, in science, and in architecture, AWS tends to be the preferred platform. But you can see in some of the areas, GCP is really driving and gaining a lot more market share in terms of the jobs that people are looking for and the skills in demand. And as we look through that as a trend as well, you can see over the last 3 years, from 2018 to 2020 here, that the rapid growth of GCP in the marketplace has been picking up. We're seeing quite a steep curve from AWS in the last year and a steady growth of Azure. Quite interesting enough, when we look at just at GCP, we can see that actually in some of the fields like analytics, science, it's actually already overtaken AWS as the preferred platform. And quite interestingly, in the management discipline, there seems to be a lot of jobs citing in the last 6 months the need for GCP around data management. Perhaps that's as more businesses are starting to use that platform. We can see that there's kind of that need to bring in the data governance, put those frameworks around, and try to understand how do we manage data in our GCP environments. So if you're looking at what cloud technologies to learn to kind of upskill in, then certainly I would say that Azure is still one of the kind of most popular in the market and probably more likely to find positions with that. But actually, if you're looking for those more niche skills, those kind of really interesting projects, then there's going to be a rise in GCP, and that's where some of the demands are going to be. Second thing we get asked about is languages, and there's always been this kind of debate around, R and Python. Which one should your business use? Should I build a team, an R team? Should I build a Python team? Particularly around data science, data engineering. Should I be using these the big data technologies and programming languages? And quite interesting enough, across both those spaces, Python is cited in quite high percentages, in the kind of around the 70s and 90s. 90s for data science, 70s for engineering, and is still the preferred skill across the market in all the jobs cited over the last 6 months. Interestingly, when we come to data science, SQL tends to be the second biggest skill or programming language that people are looking for, followed by Spark, R, and Scala. On the engineering side, interesting enough, there's no R out there. Maybe that's because it's more engineered or geared towards statistical and mathematical analytics, whereas Python's being used across both disciplines. And again, we've got in there some of the more traditional languages like Java coming through as the software engineering productionization piece drives through into that engineering piece and into that environment. So again, what skills do I would recommend or look to upskill in? Definitely, if you are looking at one of these two areas, to think about Python, make sure your SQL's up to scratch, and then look at some of those kind of more big data technologies like Spark on that side of things. Quite interestingly, we've got a scenario at the moment that creates quite an interesting market condition for job seekers and those looking to build a team. There are people being made redundant, people being at home, getting locked down, a lot more flexible working, allowing us to learn more, allowing us to develop more, and therefore that kind of creates a different need in skills. In the staffing industry, we tend to look at supply and demand for the markets in terms of two phases. And that's really kind of the number of vacancies available in the market, so the amount of choice available to those job seekers, and then obviously the number of availability of skills, so the choice available or the availability of skills for someone looking to build their team. And we tend to find that when there's high demand of vacancies, a very low skill set, basic kind of supply and demand here, but we call that what's called a candidate driven market. That means like obviously the job seekers have the choice and have the kind of power in the process. So we tend to have higher wages. It tends to be a lot contract heavy market. As a looking to build a team, you've got to make sure you've got a really fast, slick process. Otherwise, you're going to miss out on candidates to competitors and other jobs in the market. But we do tend to see a higher turnover of staff. Some staff that have been in their position for a couple of years, maybe starting to feel a little bit kind of stuck, or a little bit kind of like the tempo's not running, or the direction's not going in there. They've got a lot more choice to kind of jump ship and move around and gain more experiences, even more higher wages as the market's shifting and changing. In comparison to that, when there's lots of availability of skills but very little demand, that's what we call a client-driven market. So this is when the clients have those building a team, the corporates have a little bit more control, a little bit more power over the choice that's available and what they can do. And in these kind of markets, we tend to see lower wages. That spike that we've seen in data science starts to plateau out and starts to fade out. More people come through. We get a lot more perm heavy jobs available, a lot more markets, there's a lot more permanent positions become available. Companies can spend a little bit extra time. There could be increased time to hire as you're looking through more candidates, seeing what's available to yourself. And actually we get a lot more stability. So, people are less likely to move jobs if there's not much choice for them, or, not much demand for their skill set out there. And that creates kind of general stability. But something really interesting has happened with COVID, and it puts us in quite an interesting position here. So if we look at the kind of general movement we'd have from a candidate-driven market into a client-driven one, you'd have this kind of slow growth of demand as the skills start coming, and it would drop down in. But during COVID, the last 6 months up to the 16th of July, jobs that were posted citing specifically data science and also on the contract side have dramatically decreased. Let's say if we're looking at the same period from 2019 that we've got almost 4,000 or 5,000 jobs there in comparison to just around over 2,500. So we've got about a 48% decrease in the amount of jobs that are available overall in the data space and the data science space. And what that means is we've kind of lost half of the available vacancies without any much progress and availability of skills. Now, you may think that actually, these skills, lots of people made redundant, there's lots of people in the market, a lot more people in the market, lots of businesses closed down. But the data industry is one of the areas where we haven't seen that. We haven't seen that flood of availability of skills into the industry. And looking at some of the stats out there, there's only 8% of jobs within the data industry were put at risk in comparison to some of the other industries and affected by COVID, where it's obviously a lot higher. So although we've seen a dramatic decrease in the number of kind of positions available and the companies looking to hire and grow their teams, we haven't seen that increase in skills and that increase in availability in the market of job seekers. That there wasn't no big redundancies, there wasn't those big kind of changes. People maintained the data teams they had. And this poses a really interesting question of what does this mean for the market? What we tend to have seen at the moment is that, yes, wages do tend to be lower. They are still growing year on year, as Jez pointed out, but that kind of increase has slowed down, and some of the roles are, particularly around the where there are more availability of skills around analysts, we're seeing a decrease in the offered wages. We are still seeing a kind of faster processes, and those companies that are confident in their process, confident in their onboarding, remote onboarding, are actually the ones getting a lot of credibility and winning a lot of the candidates and available talent that is in there. The market has been a little bit swayed towards contractors. We suspect that's two things. One, the movement of IR35 into next year has allowed us to use contracts a little bit more openly than we perhaps would have, or we thought we could have before March this year. And the second reason is we feel that obviously maybe companies are not being able to commit to the long-term spends that we're seeing or that you need for a permanent hire, and therefore use contractors to get some really fast stuff done, get back on track in the time we've lost during lockdown and trying to work remotely. And we're seeing a lot more stability. Job seekers are less likely to move and change jobs at the moment because of the less availability and the number of vacancies available to them in the marketplace. It's a really kind of interesting place, and it begs the question of what happens next. Will we see this rapid spike back up into that strong candidate-driven market as we gain confidence in a post-COVID world and start getting confidence in the way we work and the remote working? Will we see those positions come up, or will that plateau and push down into more redundancies or more people training, learning, upskilling themselves while working from home or while being at home, which will help us slope into more of a client-driven market and see some of that more availability of skills come through. So it's a really interesting time in the market at the moment for the data industry. We've got some really kind of good, mature skills starting to develop and understanding starting to develop. As Jez pointed out, heads of executives are all pulling into those positions and starting to build these teams. So I think we'll see a lot more confidence around that. And finally, I just wanted to touch upon future trends and really kind of, I suppose, the research driven. And this is taken from Highland Capital Partners, likes of Forbes, CB Insights, and some of the insights that are shared around our data science executive lounge with Domino Data Labs. So there tends to be the talk around synthetic data, starting to look at how do we grow, how do we develop data that is essentially kind of made up from real life to try and move out and get more data to be able to train our models or to be able to produce some of our insights and some of our products, which then leads into more kind of, I suppose, unsupervised learning techniques. So there's been a big rise in machine learning across jobs recently. I think AI is still one of the buzzwords that gets put on every job description, whether we're really using businesses are really using AI. Certainly, we're starting to explore and research more into those unsupervised learning techniques. And if you can start to read up on these subjects, start to upskill yourself in these areas, that's the way you kind of future-proof yourself and look at where the kind of trends of what's going to be needed in the future kind of moves on beyond the soft skills that Jez talked about. And finally, AI on the edge, thinking about federated learning, thinking about kind of as we explode in more data, we want more data, we get more data, and connectivity with 5G and other networks increase. Putting those models out onto the smaller devices, the local devices, and running those models there and bringing that back into the centralized kind of understanding or learning model. So these are some of the kind of upcoming future trends that we've seen talked about, that we've seen come from some of our clients in the innovation area. And if you really want to start pushing your career forward, really want to start thinking about what teams am I building or what skills am I learning to progress my career, then start reading around these subjects. If you are looking to build your team and thinking about, this is all quite scary, how do I kind of take my team at the moment that are perhaps just doing some basic BI and move them into these future world of AI, then head over to our Lounge 3, where we're talking about workforce planning, talking about how you can kind of build those strategic frameworks to upskill your teams, to look at your succession planning, look at your brand in the market, and talk about how do you create your team and your business to be in there at the future of data. I hope you found our discussion today interesting. I hope there's kind of real good insights and facts and figures in there that could promote conversation. Do please feel free to jump over to one of our lounges, talk to one of the guys, or book a meeting with us to find out anything more. Thank you very much.